tricked into buying a house for my sister. I finally stopped being the family ATM and took back control of my life. This story has been consuming me for the past few months, and I, a 32-year-old male, need to tell it. It tells the story of how my parents tricked me into purchasing a home for them, then gave it to my younger sister, Penny, 29F, and what transpired when I finally had enough. Be advised that this is a lengthy and intricate tale of financial exploitation, family deception, and ultimately, defending oneself. My family had to constantly balance their finances when I was growing up. Even though we weren't impoverished, there was always a tension that was related to money. You could call my dad, 58M, a serial entrepreneur, but none of his business endeavors ever truly took off. He constantly pursued the next great chance, jumping from job to job. He would be selling life insurance one month, certain that he would succeed in the field, and then attempting to launch a home remodeling company the next, despite his lack of experience. Every new endeavor had the same cycle: initial enthusiasm, mounting annoyance, and unavoidable failure. The perpetual optimist, Mom, 55F, consistently supported Dad's decisions. "Your father is a visionary," she would say to us over dinner, just after he had left another secure career to take a chance on a dangerous project. "He only needs one significant break to keep us afloat." She took on part-time jobs, but her true job was to keep up this facade of normality while our financial circumstances were anything but. My sister Penny and I had a very different dynamic. I was chosen at a young age to be the family's savior and their key to a brighter future. I used this lens to examine every choice I made. I recall wanting to join the school band when I was 14 years old. My parents sat me down for a serious conversation about how the computer club would appear better on college applications, rather than encouraging my passion in music. My parents, who somehow always found money we purportedly didn't have, paid for Penny's art classes one month and her dance lessons the next, allowing her to follow whatever whimsical interests she had. In high school, the pressure increased significantly. I kept my GPA at 4.0 because anything less was considered bad, not because I was inherently smart. You would think I had committed a heinous sin after I received an A in AP Physics one semester. For days, my father would only talk to me when he made scathing remarks about how mediocrity isn't an option for someone who needs to support their family. Teenagers need to express themselves, Mom said dismissively when Penny skipped 3 days of school that week to spend time with her pals. Penny was finding herself, and I spent my high school years in this pressure cooker of expectations. I was supposed to create a thorough financial success strategy. Penny would easily go beyond curfew without any repercussions, whereas I would study until 2 o'clock in the morning, fueled by energy drinks and anxiousness. It was a sharp contrast. The traditional education system just doesn't suit her learning style, was the response given to Penny's run of D's and F's, while my B+ in calculus prompted a family conference regarding my declining standards. My parents made it apparent that my only choice when it came time for college was tech school, not because it fit with my hobbies, they never inquired about those, but rather because it provided the quickest path to a well-paying career. At every stage, they made sure I realized the extent of their sacrifice by taking out loans and spending down what little savings they had. Mom used to say, "We're eating ramen so you can have a future," but oddly, there was always money for Penny's newest pastime or adventure. Tech school was harsh due to the continual pressure from home as well as the challenging homework. I lived on the cheapest possible diet, worked part-time at a computer repair business in between classes, and was constantly reminded of my parents' investment in me. Every phone conversation featured an update on their financial difficulties, as well as overt clues about when I might be able to reimburse them. Penny, meanwhile, left high school during her last year. In fact, my parents applauded her choice rather than the drama I would have experienced. "Not everyone is cut out for school," they stated. "She is courageous for pursuing her own goals." She spent the following years exploring her options, which included working as a barista, store clerk, dog walker, and yoga instructor trainee, all of which were part-time positions that lasted no longer than a few months until she eventually quit because it wasn't fulfilling her soul. Every new job she took was hailed as her genuine calling. I was hired by a burgeoning tech startup after I graduated from computer school. Although the pay wasn't particularly noteworthy by industry standards, it was more than my family had ever received. I recall phoning my parents to break the news, hoping for a single, unadulterated moment of joy. Rather, Dad started figuring out how much I could give them per month right away, and Mom started making a list of all the bills they needed assistance with. To save money, I moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. Although it wasn't ideal, I was earning enough money to buy a home of my own. I felt compelled to live simply in order to support my parents. I tried to balance their needs with my student loan payments and other living expenditures by sending them money each month. However, it was never sufficient. Dad would call with a remorseful speech about how they had given up everything for my schooling if I didn't send an extra month. My work became my haven. I poured myself into projects, gained a reputation for solving challenging issues, and began to advance in the company. Every bonus or promotion ought to have been a triumph, but instead, they served as further sources of pressure. "So you'll be able to help us more now, right?" was the constant inquiry, rather than, "Are you proud of yourself?" or "What are your goals?" Penny's pattern of irregular employment and snap judgments persisted. When things went apart, she would return home after living with friends. She would enroll in online classes, but stop midway through. Our parents were understanding and supportive of every setback, despite the fact that she was well into her 20s. They would exclaim, "She's still young. She simply hasn't discovered her calling yet." What I assumed would be a typical Sunday meal at their rental apartment was actually the pivotal moment. Although I had been picking up on more clues than usual regarding their financial difficulties, I wasn't ready for what happened next. After all these years of investing in the family's future, Dad began to talk about how tired they were of renting, how their landlord was raising the rent once more, and how they needed a place of their own. The directness still took me by surprise, even though I understood where this was going. "Honey, we've been thinking," Mom replied, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "We've given up so much for you to reach this point, and you're doing fantastically now. Do you not think it's time to assist us in purchasing a home?" They let go of years' worth of pent-up guilt when I revealed that I was struggling to pay my own rent and save for the future. Dad talked about how they could have invested in me rather than saving for retirement. Mom sobbed as she talked about how all they wanted in their last years was stability. Penny, who was residing with them at the time, said that I was living comfortably while our parents were having financial difficulties. Months passed during the pressure campaign. They casually mentioned places they had seen in every phone conversation. Dad would share tales of their friends' kids who had done right by their parents by purchasing properties, while Mom would email ads just to look at. Penny even got involved, writing to me to say that after everything our parents had done for me, they deserved this one thing. Despite my best efforts, I was susceptible to their manipulation due to decades of indoctrination. The guilt became too much. Their age, their sacrifices, and their need for stability would keep me up at night. My therapist, yes, I did finally start seeing one, warned me about setting limits, though years of familial dynamics are difficult to overcome. I finally gave in after months of psychological combat. I persuaded myself that this was the proper thing to do, even though I had saved up a respectable sum for a down payment, money that ought to have gone toward my own future. The guilt trips would end once they had a home, I promised myself. At last, they would be content, and I could begin to concentrate on my own life. I purchased a basic, 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant. The monthly payments were difficult, but I reasoned that if I kept up my thrifty lifestyle and lived with roommates, I could manage. Everything appeared to be going well for the first several months. My parents were ecstatic, telling friends and relatives how well their son had done them and showing off their home. However, the requests increased rather than decreased. They wanted to landscape the backyard because the neighbors would judge us, and they required new furniture because the old stuff doesn't seem right in this magnificent house. Every request was accompanied by the same old guilt trip. "After everything we've done for you." I continued to pay my mortgage, sending more when I could in an effort to pay it off sooner. I convinced myself that it was worthwhile to provide my parents with the security they had never had, even if I was still living with roommates and putting my own life on hold. They began discussing how nice it would be for Penny to have a secure location close by, and they made casual references to how she was assisting them in settling in, but I chose to ignore the warning flags. In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. I was so used to prioritizing their demands that I failed to notice all the warning signs. The events that followed compelled me to face the ugly truth of my family's relationships and make one of the most difficult choices of my life. Update 1. I'll tell you what transpired when I paid a surprise visit to the house I purchased. I wish I could say I was shocked by what I discovered, but perhaps I had a sneaking suspicion this kind of stuff was coming. It all began one weekend when I attempted to phone my folks to talk about the additional mortgage payments I had been making. They never missed an opportunity to discuss money, so it was strange that neither of them answered. I made multiple efforts before deciding to drive to the residence. Everything changed because of what I discovered there. Wearing pajamas as if she owned the home, Penny answered the door. She didn't say, "Hey, nice to see you," or even, "What's brought you here?" Rather, she asked, "Oh, what are you doing here?" with an irritated expression, as though I were breaking her schedule. As I stood there, I tried to take in everything I was seeing. I felt sick to my stomach when I entered. The entire house had been converted into Penny's private area. Her personal portraits had taken the place of our family photos on the walls. Her clothes were draped over the furniture, and her art supplies were strewn all over the table that had once been our parents' dining room table. She was allegedly now a budding social media personality, and the spare room had been transformed into some sort of creative studio for her latest business endeavor. "Where's Dad and Mom?" I was able to inquire while attempting to remain calm. She answered nonchalantly, as though everyone knew. "Oh, they moved out a few weeks ago, across town. They discovered a pleasant rental. Did they not inform you?" Certainly, they hadn't informed me. No one had considered mentioning that Penny had moved in and my parents had left, even though I had been making extra mortgage payments on this place. I felt like I was physically struck by the betrayal. I contacted my folks while seated on the couch, which was now adorned with Penny's throw cushions. This time, Mom responded, and her justification infuriated me. "We plan to inform you, honey. We believe this would be the ideal setting for Penny, who required a steady setting to concentrate on her career. You're doing great, and she needs time to figure out what she wants to do." Mom's voice took on that recognizable guilt-tripping tone when I brought up the fact that I was the one making the mortgage payments. "Can't you help your sister? After all we've given up for you, your additional payments will be used to cover our new rent. Everything remains within the family." I lost it at that point. Remains with family? I didn't buy this house to give Penny a free crash pad. I bought it for you and Dad. And without notifying me, you're paying your rent with my extra mortgage payments. In an attempt to manipulate me, Mom broke down in tears and said that I was being self-centered and that family members should support one another. After I obtained my IT job, Dad got on the phone and started lecturing me about how I've changed and gotten materialistic. The actual kicker: the majority of their furniture had already been transferred into their new rental, leaving Penny with the more recent pieces I had assisted them in purchasing for the property. I was the one who was really footing the bill, and they had planned this entire event without ever contacting me. "I'm focusing on building my brand right now," Penny responded with a shrug when I questioned her about her involvement in the mortgage. "I'll be able to help out once I get my social media following up," she replied, as she opened a new ring light that she was probably buying with the additional cash I'd been giving for the mortgage. I alternated between anger and incredulity during the drive home. The family first lectures, guilt trips, and years of manipulation were all meant to keep me footing the bill while I put my own life on hold. I've been allowing myself a few days to calm down and gather my thoughts before deciding what to do next. A part of me wants to halt all payments right away and let them face the repercussions. Fighting against years of training and worrying about being the bad son who left his family is another aspect. However, one thing is certain: this cannot go on. I have had enough of being the family ATM. This weekend, I've planned a meeting with my parents to establish some clear guidelines. Penny must either start making a sizable mortgage payment, or something will need to change. I'll provide another report following the meeting, but I already have a feeling it won't be pleasant. My parents are skilled manipulators of emotions, and I have no doubt that they are already preparing their case. But for the first time in my life, I'm prepared to defend my position, even if it means playing the antagonist in their tale. I'm aware of the irony. My sister lives rent-free in a home I pay for, while I continue to share an apartment. I sometimes question how I allowed things to get to this point, but I suppose that's what happens when you're subjected to manipulation and guilt from your family for years. Update 2. Things didn't go as planned when I confronted my folks. In fact, it went worse than I had anticipated. Allow me to describe what transpired during one of the most tense family gatherings I have ever experienced. When I got to their new rental apartment, I found that it was considerably more costly than their old one. I saw a big TV and some new furniture as soon as I came in. I could now pinpoint the precise source of my additional mortgage payments. They had purposefully scheduled this meeting for a family meal, presumably in the hopes that I wouldn't object when food was involved. In hindsight, I should have anticipated that they would work against me, but Penny was also present, which was not in my original plan. They started their plan before I could even begin to talk about the house problem. My favorite childhood supper was made by Mom. Emotional manipulation 101. Dad began displaying old pictures of me while discussing simpler times when family meant everything. I made an effort to direct the discussion toward the real problem. We must discuss Penny's living situation in the house. The mood changed at once. Mom set her fork down. Dad's expression tightened. Her phone suddenly piqued Penny's curiosity. "Observe," I began. "I purchased that home for you and your father. Now that you've moved out and given it to Penny, you're paying your rent with my extra money. I wasn't told about any of this, and that needs to change." Dad went on the attack right away. "You're keeping score now, then? Following all that we have done for you." He produced a notebook, a real notebook, in which he had recorded all of the costs they had ever incurred for my schooling. "Should we discuss our expenses for your tech school? What did we give up?" Mom, who can cry on command, I promise, adopted a different tack, tears already welling up. Mom added tearfully, "We thought you'd understand. Penny is having a hard time figuring out her path, and we just want both of our children to succeed. Isn't that what family does? Support each other." I'm actually working really hard on my social media presence. I've gained 200 followers this month. The house gives me the perfect backdrop for my content. My lifestyle influencer career is about to take off, Penny said, eventually looking up from her phone to share her viewpoint. "Penny, you're living rent-free in a house I'm paying for, while I'm still sharing an apartment with roommates. How is that fair?" I was hearing this, and I couldn't believe it. "Not everything is about money. You're so privileged with your tech job. You don't understand how hard it is for creative people like me," she said, rolling her eyes. Then they delivered another bombshell. Mom hesitantly said they had already gotten quotations for the makeover and told Penny she could turn the garage into a content creation studio, expecting me to pay for it, of course. "This stops now. Either Penny starts paying her fair share of the mortgage, or we need to figure out a different arrangement." I lost it at that moment. "We put you through school. We sacrificed everything for your success, and now you're going to deny your sister the same chance," said Dad, slamming his hand on the table. "The same chance." I chuckled sourly. "This isn't about chances, it's about responsibility. Penny left high school and has never worked for more than 3 months. How can you be so cruel? We raised you better than this. Penny needs stability to pursue her dreams," Mom said, her tears growing more intense. I yelled back, "What about my dreams? I've sacrificed everything for this family, including my own dreams. Living with roommates, saving for the future, and paying for a house I can't even live in." From there, the debate got more heated as Dad began to enumerate all the sacrifices they had ever made for me. Mom continued to sob about her commitment to the family, and Penny accused me of being envious of her imminent success. "Starting next month, I'm only paying the basic mortgage, no extras." I finally made my ultimatum. If Penny wants to stay in the house, she needs to contribute. If not, we need to sell it. Mom complained that I was ruining the family. Dad branded me materialistic and ungrateful, and Penny stormed out, accusing me of ruining her career before it had even begun. You would think that I had suggested setting fire to an orphanage. On the journey home, I began to reflect on all the years I had spent trying to please them, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the guilt I'd carried, and for the first time, I realized how manipulative they were. I left that night feeling both exhausted and oddly free. Dad sent multiple angry texts about my betrayal. Penny has posted ambiguous social media updates about toxic family members and dealing with haters. Mom has been calling nonstop and leaving heartfelt voicemails about how they can't afford their rent without my help. And I've already contacted the bank to stop the extra payments. I've been the family ATM for too long, putting everyone else's demands before my own. But I'm not giving up this time. If they can't see that, perhaps more serious measures are in order. For the first time in my life, I'm willing to put myself first, even if it means becoming the antagonist in their story. But I have a sense that this isn't quite over yet. Update 3. Let me tell you how everything finally fell apart and where I am now. Following that final encounter, I took the most difficult decision of my life. I stopped making mortgage payments altogether. My phone exploded in the first week after I stopped making payments. I received 47 calls from Mom, 23 from Dad, and even messages from Penny on every social media site imaginable. I blocked them all, But they got creative, using friends' phones, making new accounts on social media, and even reaching out to relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "I can't sleep knowing my son has abandoned us," was the first guilt-tripping statement in Mom's voicemails. "We'll lose everything because of you," was the next desperate statement. In his more combative communications, Dad said, "No son of mine would do this to his family." Of particular relevance was Penny's campaign against me on social media. She began sharing stories of toxic family members that ruin your dreams on a regular basis. The surrealist part was when I looked at Penny's Instagram and noticed that she was charging $50 per session for her insights into the influencer lifestyle while holding creativity classes in the property I was paying for. She used my financial crisis as engagement material for her fans and turned the living room into a content-producing space. The bank sent out their first notice around week 3. My parents sent it to me with a single message instead of addressing the issue. "Is this what you want? To see your family homeless?" I archived the email without answering. The flying monkeys then appeared. I received calls from family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, expressing their disappointment with my decisions. I was ruining my parents' golden years, according to a long correspondence from my aunt. My former high school instructor even expressed concern about my recent changes in lifestyle on Facebook. None of them were aware that I had finally begun therapy and was recovering from years of emotional and financial abuse. My therapist assisted me in realizing that my family had established a situation in which I was always in charge of everyone's welfare except for my own. Penny's Rise Above, Surviving Family Betrayal podcast, which was taped in a house I purchased, was the true turning point. The first episode focused on her affluent tech brother's jealous attempts to crush her goals. In fact, she was able to garner a modest following from those who understood her plight. The bank's notices grew more serious after the second month. My parents changed strategies and sent me pictures of homes they were considering, all of which were far less expensive than the rental they were renting at the time. Mom texted from a different number. "See, we're trying to compromise." However, I saw that Penny had not yet been asked to help or find a space of her own. Penny hosted a Farewell to My Dream Space broadcast, complete with theatrical monologues about overcoming adversity in response to the approaching foreclosure. For her emergency relocation fund, she even created a GoFundMe page, carefully omitting the fact that she had never made any payments on the residence. Finding out that Penny had been renting out one of the rooms to another content provider and keeping the money for herself was the last straw. This came after Mom had called me in tears, explaining that they were unable to make any mortgage contributions. Penny had to quickly relocate her content development business back to our parents' rental when the bank eventually gained ownership of the house. She took care to record everything for her fans, portraying herself as a victim of uncontrollable events. I found it ironic that she never mentioned the true source of the house's funding. Dad gave me a final call, which I did answer. His voice was low, almost defeated, rather than the rage I had anticipated. He remarked, "We really thought you'd cave. We never thought you'd actually let the house go." I learned all I needed to know about their perception of me from that admission. They saw me not as a son, but as a steady source of revenue that they could control whenever they wanted. The fallout has been easier and harder than I anticipated. It's more difficult since there is a gap when you break off communication with your entire family, no matter how toxic they may be. It's easier since I'm solely accountable to myself for the first time in my adult life. I currently live in my own apartment. Though small, it belongs to me. Every choice I make is for my own future, not to satisfy the needs or desires of others. I'm finally considering purchasing a home for myself, this time just for me, as my savings account continues to increase. The family still makes an effort to get in touch now and again. Mom sends guilt-ridden, subtly accusatory holiday cards. Articles regarding unappreciative kids are emailed by Dad. Based on the drama in our family, Penny has reportedly remade herself as a trauma healing counselor. However, I'm finished. The sale of the house was about more than simply real estate. It was about escaping a lifetime of shame and exploitation. I finally come to terms with the fact that sometimes establishing limits means playing the bad guy in someone else's tale. It's never too late to quit burning yourself alive to keep others warm. If you're in a similar circumstance, the manipulation is more difficult than the guilt, but it's your life to live. Avoid waiting as long as I did to come to that realization. I want to thank everyone for their warm reactions and tremendous support. I learned from reading your comments that I'm not the only one who has to deal with financial exploitation in the family. I was strengthened by the accounts of so many of you who had gone through similar things. This community has been really encouraging and reassuring. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.